It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the Museum of Fire's annual History Week Keynote Presentation. This is the 4th year that the museum has participated in History Week, and so I'm pleased to see that interest in our historical activities has continued. Even after all of the lockdowns were lifted, people have a wider variety of choices, but they still continue to engage with the museum, and History Week is no exception. History Week serves as a central time for us each year when we reflect on the work of our heritage team, and we pay tribute to those who have contributed to the museum and who have aided in this work. My name is Belinda McMartin, and I am the CEO of the Museum of Fire. Today, I will present our annual keynote address, and at the conclusion of that, we will share a special sneak peek of an upcoming project that our heritage team are working on. And they will also show the History Week Awards, which they will announce. If you are watching this on our website, you'll be able to watch the entirety of proceedings in full. However, if you are watching this on our social media platforms, such as Facebook and Instagram, you will notice that they've been chopped into smaller pieces, which is just allowed for ease in uploading. If you would like to watch the presentation in full though, please head over to our website. Now, on to today's presentation, which I am honoured to share with you. Women have always played a role in the fire protection of New South Wales. In many instances, it was the women who manned the phones while their husbands were away at work during the daytime. It was the women who would then sound the alarm when calls of emergency came in. This was especially true in the remote areas and regional areas of New South Wales. It wasn't just the wives, it was also the daughters and the sisters who took part in this practice. These women would take an emergency call. They would then jump to it first and foremost to alert the men in the town that their assistance was required. One story that I came across when completing research back in my days as the Heritage Officer came from Ballina Fire Brigade. The daughter of the local mayor, a Miss Webster, would use her personal motorised car to transport the brigade and any equipment they needed to a fire. This was because the brigade did not receive their own motorised fire appliance until the late 1920s. Even after they did receive a motorised appliance though, it is noted that she often would be the one driving it, as many of the men were not qualified motor operators. So this is just one example of how a woman played a crucial part of a fire brigade, but it wasn't necessarily on the books, and it isn't necessarily something that has been easily recorded. This year's theme of History Week 2023 is Voices from the Past, with a focus on giving a voice to those who have been underrepresented in our history. Stories such as these, which are part of firefighting history in New South Wales, are really crucial and really important to the wider tale of firefighting. But I'd hazard a guess that many people haven't heard many of these stories. There is one particular group that has played a really large part, and there is a really big legacy within the New South Wales Fire Brigade today, Fire and Rescue New South Wales, that you probably don't even know, which is why I'm really pleased to be able to share their story today. The first time that women were formally introduced into the New South Wales Fire Brigade was during World War II. Many of you would be familiar with Lady Liberty, predominantly in the USA, but she and her voice was heard all around the world. She called women to action for the war effort, and in Australia, women heeded this call. A leading body in undertaking this work was the Women's Australian National Service, otherwise known as WANS, who oversaw the training of women in various fields, such as ambulance drivers and also in motor mechanics. The Women's Fire Auxiliary, the WFA, was established as a division of WANS, but they were under the auspice of the New South Wales Fire Brigade, and this was a response to the mounting possibility of a Japanese invasion. This movement was originally driven by Lady Wakehurst, who was the wife of the then Governor of New South Wales. Lady Wakehurst was elected president of the organisation, and training was conducted by the New South Wales Fire Brigade's officers. The program was initially restricted to Sydney, and it was only for women aged between 30 and 45. Enlisted women undertook 8-week training course, which covered air raid procedures, how to deal with incendiary bombs, and also how to deal with fire in the home should your house be hit by an incendiary bomb. The course also covered rescue procedures, first aid, and watchroom practices. In effect, these women were being trained much the same as the probationary firefighters of the time were. However, while the probationary firefighters receiving on-the-job training, these women were receiving it more in a structured, classroom-like environment. It was hoped that by training so many in such a short time, they would be ready to help if the crisis should evolve. Upon completing their training, the women of the WFA were assigned to their local fire station, where they attended one night of drills each week for 90 minutes, and they each had to undertake watchroom duty one night a week at their station. The first women completed their training in 1941, and by the following year, there were over 600 women within the WFA. As a demonstration of their capabilities and to showcase their training, the WFA held a training and demo day at Rushcutters Bay on the 19th of July, 1942. Almost all of the women in the WFA took part, and it's noted that over 3,000 spectators came to see them. As a result of the program's popularity in Sydney, it was extended across the rest of the state, especially targeting the key strategic locations of Lithgow, Wollongong and Wagga Wagga, which were the 3 locations to receive WFA teams outside of Sydney. The training of the WFA outside of Sydney was conducted over a less intense, longer period of time. In many cases, it was similar to that of the probationary firefighters within these smaller towns, known as partially paid, volunteer or on-call firefighters. As such, they were receiving on-the-job training, but they were still doing the same jobs as the WFA in Sydney. Prior to 1942, all WFA members had to also be members of WANS. However, after the armed forces opened up recruitment to women, the number of women joining WANS, and thus the WFA, actually began to decline. For this reason, the age restriction was loosened and it was opened up to more women. Despite this initial rush of members, this had slowed down by 1945, and it was estimated that there were around 800 trained members of the WFA by 1945. Thus, while there were 600 in that first year, there was only an extra 200 in the subsequent years. As the war drew to a close, the WFA was one of the first wartime bodies to be disbanded, with women immediately returning to their original roles within society and the family home. Indeed, the role of the WFA and the importance to New South Wales Fire Brigade and the history of firefighting in New South Wales was relegated to the annals of history. If we're being honest though, it's a bit of an overstatement to say that they were relegated to history. Fire and Rescue New South Wales does not have a concise history of the Women's Fire Auxiliary within its archive. Over the years, the records were lost, they were never placed together, and it's only through the works of individuals who have a keen eye or have taken an interest in the Women's Fire Auxiliary that we've been able to build up this history of what the WFA actually were, and we've been able to uncover their real importance to both the war effort and the history of firefighting in New South Wales, particularly the New South Wales Fire Brigade. One legacy of the WFA that has largely been forgotten was that the WFA paved the way for the way that training is undertaken in fire and rescue today. Prior to World War II, all firefighter training was largely done on the job. While some basic tasks were undertaken at headquarters, firefighters were then sent off to their respective stations, where they received their training. The WFA, though, was the first group to see training en masse and in a classroom-like environment. In 1945, the New South Wales Fire Brigade's Chief Officer Bear recommended that the training of new recruits take place in a similar way to this, and they chose the newly closed number 9 Wallara Fire Station to be the first training academy. This was the first time that the training of male firefighters would take place in a classroom environment. From 1946, it was referred to as a school, and today the use of the Emergency Services Academy out at Orchard Hills is a legacy of the template laid out by the WFA. For the next 40 years, women played, unfortunately, little role other than administrative in the operations of the New South Wales Fire Brigade. That all changed though in the early 1980s when Kristine Klugman became the first woman to be appointed to the New South Wales Fire Brigade's Board of Fire Commissioners. This is the body that governed the New South Wales Fire Brigade at the time. She joined in 1982. Aged 41 and a mother of 3 girls, Dr. Klugman, as she would become, volunteered to be the first female to formally undertake the physical test faced by the New South Wales Fire Brigade recruits. She passed the test, and in so doing proved to her fellow board members that the opportunity to become a firefighter should be open to both genders. In 1985, also just after the centenary of the New South Wales Fire Brigade, the opportunity to become a firefighter was open to women, with the first permanent firefighters entering the training college in the following years, and in 1987, the first retained firefighters joining the ranks. To celebrate the 40th anniversary of the inclusion of women in the New South Wales Fire Brigade ranks, in 2025, the museum will be hosting an exhibition to tell the forgotten stories of these women who paved the way for today's female firefighters. This project will culminate in the publication of a book, and the museum is proud to be able to help give these women of history a voice. As part of this project, oral histories are being recorded, and we are delighted to share one of those with you today. Before we do that though, I would like to hand over to one of the museum's board members, Fire Rescue New South Wales Assistant Commissioner Cheryl Steer, to announce the 2023 Life Member inductee for the museum. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this presentation today and to take part in our History Week activities. We thank you, and stay tuned as there is still so much more to come this morning. Thank you.
In 1982, Dr. Kristine Klugman was the first woman appointed to the Board of Fire Commissioners. At that time, she was also President of the Australian Museum Trust, and she would later be appointed to the council, the interim council for the National Maritime Museum. During her time on the board, she took a keen interest in the Museum of Fire, which was located at Circular Quay. The museum needed to be moved and a new site had to be found. The old power station at Penrith was provided as a possible location for the museum, and Dr. Klugman was able to come out and inspect the site. At the time, she described it as the smelliest building she'd ever been in, and that was because it was basically a disused power station that had been derelict for a number of years. She realised the potential of what the building could be. She knew that we needed space to be able to display fire appliances and put the ladders up so that people could see the true size and scale of what we have on display here. This year's History Week theme is about voices from the past, and it's such an important time to recognise the role that Dr. Kristine Klugman played in the history of not only the New South Wales Fire Brigades and Fire and Rescue, but the Museum of Fire. As I said, she was not only the first female appointed to the Board of Fire Commissioners, she was first Deputy President as a female. In that role, she undertook a number of duties. She introduced promotion by merit. She fought for women to be able to join the fire service. She came up against significant arguments as to why women couldn't be firefighters, and as a result, she was the first female to undertake the physical aptitude test, which she successfully did. That led to women being able to apply to be firefighters in 1984 and the first female firefighters in 1985. It is with great pleasure and honour that I induct Dr. Kristine Klugman into the museum's annual membership program. She is the 4th life member of the museum and a very well-deserving recipient.
I had a very varied past. I mean, those days the opportunities for women for careers wasn't as great as it is now. And so I went into nursing, and I did nursing at the Royal Hobart Hospital. I went overseas and did some work in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. Came back and did midwifery at Crown Street Women's Hospital, as it was then. And then I met up with my then husband, Dick Klugman, who was a GP, and had 3 kids in quick succession. Then I decided I needed, as all his friends had degrees, I needed one too. So I went to Macquarie University as a mature age student and got a BA and then an MA in Community Studies. I then worked at the Western Metropolitan Health Region in Community Health Evaluation. And at the same time I was on the museum board of the Museum of Australia board, and the Maritime Museum I was involved in as well. And then after that I was involved in writing a company history of Burns Philp, which was a trading company, an island trading company. So that's where my history came in, that I'd done at university. I was very politically involved. I was very politically active in the Labor Party. And Peter Anderson was the Minister for Police and Emergency Services. And he rang me up one day and said, "Would you like to be on the board of fire commissioners?" I said, "The what?" And he said, "Have lunch and we'll talk about it." So we went to Parliament House and had lunch, and he had bangers and mash, as I recall. And he said, "This is what the Board of Fire Commissioners is all around. We're looking for a deputy president, and I think that, you know, you should do it." And so I thought about it, and I did my research, as a good little researcher that I am. And I came back and said to Peter, yes, it sounds like a very good opportunity. So I was introduced to the Board of Fire Commissioners, who were as astonished as I was at the, the fact that a woman was in the role. It was a very, very conservative organisation. I was the first woman, and there was a good deal of trepidation, I think, amongst some of the more conservative people, both administration and firefighting, in that. And of course there were no women firefighters. So one of my first roles being very strongly of the view that women, if they want to be firefighters, should be firefighters, be able to be firefighters as their choice. One of the main reasons was given was that they were too small to reach the pedals of in the motors. I thought, well, seats are adjustable, you know, for goodness sake. The other thing was saying they weren't strong enough to carry the hoses and things. So I said, okay, I'll do the physical test. And I was then 42, I think. So I did it was called the FRAB test in those days. So it was running up ladders and through holes and lifting weights and doing all sorts of things. And I passed with flying colours. And so I went back to the board and said, look, if I can do it as a 42-year-old who hasn't done particularly physical things, you know, for years, a younger, you know, 21-year-old would have no problem at all. So one of the last objections to women being in the fire brigade was thereby obliterated, and they had no more excuses about it. And then subsequently, women began to come into the fire brigades. One of my achievements would be getting the first women firefighters into the service, changing the emphasis in policy to much more towards fire prevention, seeing the scope of the fire service as being outside purely putting out fires to being a much broader function within a society, having people recognised on merit for their promotion, and the Museum of Fire. I think that those were probably what I would regard as my biggest achievements. So the museum had to move out of the premises it was in, and we found temporary location on one of the wharves, which I thought was a terrific spot down in Circular Quay on one of the wharves. But other people realised what a premier spot it was as well, and we were pushed out of there. So we were looking for a spot, and so I did a lot of research, and keeping in mind when the ladders are extended how tall the motors are. I don't know how the suggestion came of the old powerhouse at Penrith, but I went out to have a look, and it was an absolutely derelict building. It was full of pigeon shit everywhere. And the people with me sort of said, oh, and I said, look at it with the eye of imagination, you know. And so we got it for $1 a year. I think I did, after long negotiations through the minister, Peter Anderson, who was in favour, we got a rental on the old powerhouse in Penrith and moved all the motors out there and got volunteers in to clean it up and got it prepared. So, but my main concern with that was education for the kids, to have the kids coming in using Mr. Cinders and the puppet, but expanded program of prevention, fire prevention to kids. That was and to adults of course as well. But I think that was an achievement. I think that was a good thing to do. I think prevention and extinguishing of fires is the role of the fire services. So I think that it's great that people like to see the old motors and admire them, and that the enthusiasts keep them in such good order and running order. I think that's good PR for the fire brigade, to have them in a procession and to have the kids come in and see the old. It introduces them to the fire service in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. It makes an avenue through which you can talk about fire prevention. I was very aware that as the first woman, there was a lot of attention on me, and I had to fulfil the role competently and efficiently, and know that make it obvious that I had done the homework, that I was taking it seriously, and that what I said should be taken account of. It sounds a bit proud, but in a way you've got more to prove. If you're the first at doing something, you've got more to prove, because there's plenty of criticism about you. So you've got to prove the critics are wrong in the most polite way that you possibly can. As I say, there were some times when I just had to really stick to my guns, when there was a conflict of interest, a genuine conflict of interest that was very difficult to reconcile. I think I drew on my inner strength and convictions that women can do anything that they want to do. There was a lovely slogan on the T-shirts at the time: "A woman's place is in the House and in the Senate," which I always thought was a really good slogan to have, that a woman can do anything she wants to do. And I think following the wild 70s and the women's movement, which was particularly influential, it was sort of a consolidation. The 80s was a time we say, okay, women's equality, we can now do it. We can now move into the organisations which were very conservative, like the police and the fire services, and we can have women claim their legitimate place in those organisations. When you do something so many decades ago, and it seems to have disappeared with no trace, and you think, okay, I did that, but so what, sort of thing. And now, in fact, the fact that you traced me and made me a patron of WIN makes me very proud, and I'm delighted to see now the influence wasn't all wasted, that there was some longer term effects of the work that I was doing. Seems like a long time ago. Now we've got a Reserve Bank governor who's a woman. I mean, wow, you know.
Times have changed. Chris, the reason that I'm here today is, as I spoke to you, the Museum of Fire is doing its Voices from the Past coming up on the 10th of September. But a very important part of that is actually the announcement of the new life member for the museum. Oh. So currently there are 3 life members of the Museum of Fire. One of those people is Mark White. But in recognition of everything that you did in your role as Deputy President of the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Museum of Fire would like to make you the 4th life member of the museum. So here is the plaque.
Oh, that's marvellous.
Just advising you that you are now the 4th life member of the museum.
That is a great honour. Thank you very much. I feel overwhelmed. That's marvellous. I'm very pleased. We'll show it. There it is.
Hi, my name is Ben and I'm the curator here at the Museum of Fire. My role means I get to manage our small but amazing heritage team, produce exhibitions and update our existing permanent displays, manage our extensive physical and digital collection, and conduct research in-house or for inquiries made by members of the public. One of those main areas of research that we do on behalf of Fire and Rescue New South Wales is station histories, which is one of the most rewarding aspects of my job as an historian and curator. This year, we wanted to pay special tribute to a group of people who are passionate about the history of the Fire Brigade, like we are. And in saying that, it would be my honour to be able to give a special history award to number 461 Thirroul Fire Brigade. Thirroul got to celebrate a special milestone of their brigade being 100 years old. The current firefighters there, who have had the pleasure of meeting, are so passionate about their stations and their brigades past, presenting their photos, achievements, and even some old firefighting equipment around their station to celebrate the past. When I attended their centenary celebration in July, the stories told by the members currently in service and those who belong to families who have participated in the brigade for decades was simply fantastic. It was such a pleasure working with the brigade and writing their history and getting to meet them. I look forward to their next historical milestone we reach with them. Congratulations to Thirroul Fire Brigade.